We should catch up, yeah. Where are you
We're not doing this, but I'm just giving you an example of how you can be active.
Really big bag.
Do we have a run here?
Yep.
Yep. Come sit in front of our place. One side or the other.
I'll just.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Hey, who are you?
Thanks very much, everyone. My name's Peter Yates. I'm standing in for Eugene today in his absence. We're going to mix things up a bit today. We're going to have Atwal and Arun are going to give their lightning talks up front, and then Alex is going to give his longer talk, the main event, after they've had their sessions. Okay, everyone comfortably seated. We're all running at the back. Okay, Atwal, take the stage.
Thanks a lot, Peter. I'll probably refrain from using the mic. I hope I'm loud.
We're recording, so you need to go into.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a good start. So sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but I think my laptop is giving up, and that's how I had to come in first. So hi, everyone. My name is Ujjwal, and I've come to Australia 3 years back as a new immigrant. And the first thing which people told me to do when I come here is to buy the right health insurance policy, right? And yeah, I went for it. The two names will definitely come to everybody's mind. And the moment I went and started looking for the policies, I called up the customer care, right? And that's the best part of your life. You end up talking to people who you don't know, and they give you so much of information. But after 3 minutes of them trying to sell you the right policy, the first set of golden words come from their mouth. Can anybody guess what could they be? Can I please put you on hold for a few minutes to answer to your questions? And trust me, after talking to around 3 to 4 different insurers and trying to understand their products, the overall calls ran almost about 18 to 20 minutes, with every call having at least 3 to 4 times of these golden words getting repeated. Now, what's the major problem here? The problem which stands here is the problem of information availability, right? You're asking question to the company who's trying to sell you a product, and probably the person selling at the other end doesn't have the information available with him or her at the right point in time and at the right pace. And that's where I'm going to talk about AI-powered information extraction. So let me just quickly grab my laptop because that's where I'm sharing from. Now, the case that I talked about is primarily to do with, a call center kind of a scenario, where each executive is trying to sell one product. But think of a scenario wherein there is a broker involved, and they are selling from so many insurance companies, trying to select the right product. And when a customer calls them or tries getting information on the product from them, they have almost 30 to 35 different insurers from whom they're selling. They have different set of products from each and every insurer, and then reaching out to each of these product disclosure statements where these information points are captured, figuring out the right information from these product disclosure statements and giving the response back to the customer becomes a tedious task. So what you're seeing on the flow that how it works, and this is something that we have done for one of the insurance distribution companies. They kind of sell products from approximately 35 different insurance companies, and these are the kind of challenges they face. So what we are saying is, we are taking your hassle away. We are trying to give you a solution which will automatically decide on which product disclosure statement to look at, what information to extract, and you just throw the query at the solution, and it'll tell you what the actual response is, which you can share back with your customers, right? So without really, wasting any further time, let's straight away jump onto the solution that we have created, and I'll show you a live demo of it. All right, so there we go. Okay, so let the Teams load up. This whole solution is being built on the Microsoft Azure suite and is being deployed on Microsoft Teams. So any of the executives who are trying to use it, they don't really have to, jump onto another screen or another application to really work with this particular product. And they can, easily start typing their queries. And I hope that, yeah, it comes up. So this is how the product looks like. You're just like any other Teams chat, wherein, you can ask queries and get your responses back. So over here, there's a small demo where we have insurance products coming in from 4 different companies. You can see the names there. So let's say, think of it as a call center executive who goes there and says, okay, I want to know something about Blue Zebra. Okay, and the solution tells you that, okay, Blue Zebra sells all these different products. Which one are you interested in? We have queries on motor insurance. And then, it tells you, okay, what queries do you have? And we say, hey, what covers are offered by this product? And this is where the engine starts working. It tries looking at the product, the details in the product, and gives you a comprehensive summary of how exactly the response looks like. So it's kind of telling you that you have 3 different coverages which are being offered by this particular product. And along with this, you also get to see a couple of citations. Now, a lot of times people feel that it's AI, the solution or the response might not be that great. How can we check whether they're responding correct? And that's where citations come in handy. So you can always click on these citations. It'll open that specific product disclosure statements on that specific page where the covers are being presented. So this is one of the citations, and then the second one from where it would have picked up all the information, right? So you see on this particular one, you have all the 3 covers being mentioned, and that's where, the information is getting picked up from. So this is the solution that we have really built for this client, and this is pretty well accepted, currently in use, deployed, pretty well accepted. What are the benefits of this particular solution? Let me just quickly jump onto that. Yep. Reliable. It uses very advanced vector embeddings, which make sure that the query are being correctly matched with the information which is available in these documents, and the right information is getting picked up. You have abuse control. If you try and put in wrong words in there, if you try and abuse the system, it'll automatically detect and kind of respond back to you saying that, hey, can you please not use these words? Easily integratable. As you can see that it is currently running on Teams. You don't have to run around and open a new web page or a new application to really do it. You can integrate it with existing infrastructure, and it's scalable. The whole solution is working out of cloud. It works on a pay as you go kind of a subscription. So as your usage increases, it automatically scales to the requirements. Yeah, those were 5 minutes of my flash talk. My name is Ujjwal. I'm kind of leading the data science and AI practice at Ingudi. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and would be happy to share thoughts again. Thank you.
We have one question. Anyone with a quick question? No, what? Yep.
Okay. Me or him?
Yeah, you ask a question. I'll repeat it into the microphone.
Oh, okay. It seems to me with insurance selling, there's the problem of understanding the product base, which is what you're addressing. But the other problem is the customers don't always know what they really want or need. And there's an AI problem there to solve understanding the customer.
Yeah.
So maybe, just suggestion, you could leave the brokers out of the equation completely and go straight between the database of policies and the customer's naive or whatever understanding.
Absolutely.
So for those on the line, the question here was about taking this approach, and rather having a broker in the middle, you go directly online to the customers.
That's a very, very valid and wonderful suggestion. There are a couple of things which comes along with products related to AI, especially in these times. The moment you build a solution which is directly customer facing, the companies become very apprehensive. They don't want these solutions to directly go to the customer at this point in time. So human in the loop is always preferred. But what we are intending to do is a little different from what you've just suggested. We are currently trying to work on a similar solution, which is going to do a lot of product comparison. So rather than a customer being told on what exactly they might need, it will give you a summary of comparison of different products, highlighting that what is one product good at and what is the other product good at, so that the customer can make an informed decision. But all this communication, at least till now in our experience, is going through a human, which is representing the organization and not directly interfaced with the customer.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And if you've got any further questions, we'll have time at the end.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Arun. Yeah,
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Arun Prasad. I run a research-led company called AI Whisper. I just want to share some research that we're doing with a university college called SPJN, Global School of Management. The idea is just to get feedback and ideas. So a little bit about AI Whisper also. So shameless claim to fame, we built the world's first model with beat human level accuracy for ISO 27001 orders. So anybody who's in IT, cybersecurity would know. Scan the cloud, scan your machines, look at policies, match. It takes 30 days. We brought it down to 10 minutes. The product's live, used across 200 plus clients. So our goal is, but we're hardcore at the end of the day, we're a research-led company. So this is some new research we're doing for a client. They've allowed us to basically just share a few things. Problem statement, if you look at investment analysis, especially if you're a superannuation company, you have a lot of folks who are doing basically junior investment analysis, looking investment outlooks, macro, micro. People are trying to look at large language models, saying, can we automate that entire process using OpenAI and all those different models, right? There's a concept called benchmarking. So benchmarking says, how accurate are those large language models in doing that work? So these are the top research-led benchmarks in the area of investment analysis. So you've got Investor Bench, FinBen, Convin, FinQA. If you're in the research if you're an investment analyst, these are the kind of research papers you would be reading. The current industry benchmarks are around something called FinBen, which evaluates the performance of large language models for 35 pre-existing data sets. By data sets essentially means capabilities. For example, can you read an earnings call report? Can you read an investment report? Can you understand what are the charts shown, like GDP, inflation, all those things, and then suggest a path forward? And then Confin QA tries to do it in more of a question answer kind of thing, like you're having a conversation, like two economists having a conversation with each other. So they have their own limitations. Convin FinQA really focus more on numerical reasoning, that can you read earnings calls reports and, for example, revenue and things like that. FinBen essentially had model size limitations, like it picked up only a few models and is probably not current. So currently, a lot of you would have heard about something called chain of thought. Just wanted to check, anyone heard of chain of thought? Large language models? Okay, looks like the whole, yeah, fair enough. So you've got DeepSeek R1, which caused a lot of waves, and OpenAI O1. These are the new models that I've got, where they're saying that they claim we can reason, we can think. The problem is there's a research gap. There's no research that has been done that how good is the human chain of thought, right? How humans go down. And I'll specifically talk about discounted cash flow. We're focused on discounted cash flow models that investment analysts and superannuation managers, portfolio managers fill in. So they go through a specific process of investigating a company, asking questions, doing the analysis. how good is a large language model versus that? Because 9 out of the 10 managers plan to incorporate. Now, this is by Mercer. If you're in investment industry, you'll know Mercer, big name. They basically said 9 out of 10 managers plan to incorporate AI in the investment analyst process. This I think is still too high. Like they're claiming that general models are achieving 80, 90%. We as a company, we do independent benchmarking. We've seen much below that. When we go into domain specific, hallucinations are pretty prevalent. Read the latest research reports that came out 2 weeks ago at a conference from some of the largest VCs who are using agentic models. Some of the reasoning models, it goes down to even 50%. So our approach is still the same thing. We're doing conversational Q&A research. We're basically building a human evaluation data set benchmarking for investment analysis. We're also doing it for taxonomy, like does the model understand the concept of free cash flow drivers? Does it understand discount rate in this, terminal value and assumptions for discount cash flow, right? The idea is like whatever the work a junior investment analyst does, preparatory work to fill a discounted cash flow spreadsheet, all that work needs to be captured. This is what a human evaluation data set looks like. So this has been done by humans, that entire team. So we hired a team of 16 people who come from an economics finance background. A lot of them are students. Some of them are CFA level 1 and CFA level 2. So they know their domain. They're not new. So they're basically writing these human like written evaluations. You'll also see further action. That is the next step action in a chain of thought. So they're building the whole human chain of thought before the spreadsheet is updated with saying revenue I think revenue will go up 20%, property revenue goes up by 2% for, let's say, Apple or any other company, right? So these are humans who are doing this. We're doing this for S&P 500 companies. We're creating a benchmark evaluation data set of 10,000 questions. These are all the different areas that we're basically doing our data set creation for. So yeah, this is just some research. I thought I'll just come and share if anyone's interested about it. Folks who know our company know we do independent benchmarking in the industry. I myself come from the financial industry. I used to work with Deutsche and Citibank for a long time. Did a lot of work across this area, and then moved to AWS and picked up AI along the way over the last 8 years. Also used to work for LSEG and sell their AI solutions for London Stock Exchange Group and Refinitiv. So yeah, if anyone wants to know about the research, happy to help. If anyone wants to help us with the research, with the evaluation, we're starting the evaluation next month. So we're reaching out to people from the industry who could, so the evaluation work is very simple. We'll randomize all these things, what the AI answer, the human answer. It's like a Turing test. You just check an answer. We'll then share with you how many people preferred the AI answer versus the human answer. And also in the discounted cash flow model, what input that the AI produced versus what input the human produced, which one did you prefer? So both the objective and the subjective. That's it from my end. Arun Prasad from AI Whisper. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Arun. So moving on, we're going to have time for questions at the end. Moving on, we've got Alex up, the main event of the evening. Ready to go? Okay. So Alex has recently joined the Actuaries Institute as the head of AI and data. He's a serial entrepreneur and ecosystem builder, and he's got a long history, starting at Barclays and then founding Chalk and Stone in 2015. He was there for 6 years, came back to Australia, and he co-founded the Spark Festival since 2016, including 13,000 people, annually at the Spark Festival. He's a founding director of FinTech Australia and is on a long list of advisory boards, which I won't read out because it'll eat up his time. So, Alex.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks to Ujwal and Arun as well, and welcome to everybody. Much prettier slides than mine. You'll be wishing you ate more pizza. All right. So for tonight, what I'm going to do is quickly just take you through and give you a bit of a sales pitch of AICon, but then we're going to get into something a bit more interesting around the project that I'm working on in terms of data and AI, what that's all about, and work together as a bit of a combined brain. Yeah, do you reckon we might be up for that if we've still got some energy left after the 4 slices? All right, so AICon is something we kicked off last year. As you can appreciate, it can be really tricky kicking something new in terms of a product, especially in the post-COVID world when it comes to an event. And the reason we did this is one of the key things that our team noticed is that there's a lot of events around data and AI more broadly that are run by people that aren't experts in data and AI, talking to other people that aren't experts in data and AI. And we really wanted to do something quite unique for practitioners. And so AICon, its genesis and its whole purpose is really to bring practitioners together to talk about what are the interesting things happening in our sector. We were very lucky last year that in our inaugural year, we had Cassie Kozikov, who used to be the chief data officer for Google, their first actually, and giving us the keynote speech. And we had some wonderful feedback from the audience that participated. And so there's a really interesting program that we're putting together. This year, it's going to be on the 25th of August. And I'm hoping everyone in this room knows who this person is. Jeremy's phenomenal. He's one of the leaders in data and AI in the country. And he's actually come out of conference retirement, would you believe, just for AICon. He told us last year, that's it, I'm done. I no longer do conferences. And on the back of how good we did it last year, he goes, okay, fine, I'll do it this year. I'll come out and I'll be your keynote speaker. So we're very grateful to have Jeremy, and alongside him, there's no doubt a whole bunch of other key people that you'd know in our sector that are participating as well. So we're about to release AICon for registration, and as always, there will be the early bird specials. So feel free to scan the QR code. That should take you, if we've got it all right, and if we haven't, it'll be somewhat embarrassing. But that will link you straight to the website and get you to Rego. And of course, please share that with your friends and network, because it is designed for practitioners to do some meaningful stuff. And the networking that we had as part of that as well was just awesome. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So that's the sales pitch for tonight. So I think we all got through that pretty safely. How's that? All right. So what am I going to talk about next? One of the things, and the primary reason I'm here at the Institute, because I'm actually not an actuary, is I'm working on a industry-wide data and AI project. And the core reason why I'm working on this is because there actually isn't an organisation that is bringing together data and AI professionals here in Australia. And as a result, there's a whole bunch of problems to solve across the industry. I've worked and spoken with a whole bunch of employers, big to small, startups, SMEs, big corporate giants, government agencies, universities, startups and scale-ups. Spoken to highly experienced practitioners as well, and tried to understand, well, what are the problems to solve? What are the issues that the industry is facing, both from an organizational point of view, an employer, as well as for practitioners? What are you guys struggling with? And I want to share with you tonight some of the things that we've been learning and see whether or not any of that resonates. And that's where the acting as a combined brain comes in. This is going to be collaborative. We're really keen to hear your thoughts, your challenges, what you disagree with, what you agree with. Ready to go on a journey? All right, let's do it. So what does this represent? Well, the first thing we wanted to understand was, what is the data and AI workforce in Australia? So we worked with LinkedIn and we did a bit of a data map to map the workforce. We collected together a range of role titles, because everything in LinkedIn is basically categorized by roles. So that's really the key attribute you've got to work from. And we found effectively groupings of these 5 clusters that you can see up there, in the on the slide. And what we were able to identify is across each of those clusters, about 75,000 people working across data and AI in Australia. So everything from, analyst through to scientist, AI engineer, etc., and everything else in between. Now, of course, not everyone has a LinkedIn profile, and everyone potentially has different nuances of roles that maybe, our descriptions didn't capture. So you could kind of extrapolate, probably there's 100,000, let's say, that are in our space today in Australia. This gives you a bit of a indication in terms of what some of the interesting groupings within that actually look like. So no surprise that when we looked at the top 10 titles, the biggest grouping was analysts, all the way through to research managers and some in between, which was surprising to us, was senior financial analysts or financial analysts, which when you look at profiles in LinkedIn, they emerged because a lot of the skills that they had and the type of work that they were doing was basically fundamentally data analysis and elements of data science. What's interesting too is some of the key industries that some of these roles are emerging as well and present in. And perhaps not surprising, but surprising also is what were the top companies that employ people in data and AI and that sector in general. To me, obviously, and I'm sure to many of you in the room, probably not surprising that CBA is by far the biggest employer. But there was some interesting responses to AWS maybe being in the top 10 here in Australia, perhaps not some other firms as well. And a key thing to mention as well is the Australian federal government, so the Australian Public Service overall, because people would typically say, I'm a part of the Department of X, as opposed to I'm part of the Australian Public Service. And our understanding from working with the Australian Public Service Commission is that there's probably several thousand people across the Australian Public Service that work in data and AI. So as a potential single biggest employer of people in our sector. Some of the things that we took away from this workforce map is that it's heavily decentralized. So when we look at some of the big corporates and some of the concentration in sectors, one of the big ones, no doubt, being financial services, even though here we've got a breakdown between FS and banking. But when you agglomerate insurance, super, banking, wealth, for example, about 15% of the workforce in data and AI is, broadly speaking, in financial services. So quite an insight is just how decentralized the workforce is from an industry point of view, but also when you think about it from a corporate point of view, there's a massive proportion of the workforce in our sector that is spread across every industry, but heavily in tier 2, tier 3 SMEs right across the country. So as a market, we're pretty much everywhere. And it's quite exciting in that on an increasing basis, we're going to be more than anything really the horizontal sector that powers the economy, which is quite exciting. Now, what we also have done over the last several months is put a survey together, which we got great responses from about 150 practitioners in data and AI across those various roles and various industries. And we said to them, look, when you finished at uni and entered the workforce, what were the key things from a skills and competency point of view did you find you were really lacking in? And how is that translating to some of the gaps that you're facing in your career today? And not surprisingly, but there are some really interesting ones. So there's business context, there's real world use of data, which they weren't able to play with at uni, communication, presentation, governance, ethical frameworks. And one of the key things that we pulled out of this is the fact that they're pretty much all non-technical skills. So universities aren't really hitting the mark when it comes to how we're preparing graduates to actually handle the real world and business world of interacting in an enterprise or business environment. What's also interesting when we look at some of these other dimensions, this is now flipping the coin to the other side. Rather than in terms of what I need and are lacking as a practitioner, this is now the employer's view in terms of what are some of the things that they think are important from people in our sector in terms of the skills that they're wanting to see. Critical reasoning and problem solving was one of the top. Once again, communication and presentation, teamwork and collaboration, no surprise. Adaptability and flexibility. I'm sure that's probably something that we're all getting told every day. But when we combine the two and go, okay, well, how does the practitioner view compare to what employers are telling us? The biggest gap, which actually surprised me quite a lot, is in critical reasoning. And so one of the significant skill gaps that we're looking to address in partnership with other organizations is how can we help plug that gap around critical reasoning, where it's kind of counterintuitive that professionals in data analytics, data science, AI, which are fundamentally meant to be strong in critical reasoning, first principles problem solving to then derive a solution, are severely lacking in these skills. So it'd be interesting when we get to some conversations to really hear your views on some of that. Now, this is the really interesting so what. So we aggregated then all of the interviews we had, the discussions, the meetings, the survey results, and developed this. So what you've got here in front of you is how we've created effectively 3 layers of problems to solve across the sector. Some of these are market level, some at an organizational level, and some at an individual level. And you can see here, and I'd be keen to get your thoughts as well on whether any of these problems to solve resonate for you in terms of what you experience in your companies, whether it resonates in terms of what you've experienced in your own careers and what you're seeing generally. Some of the things that we've captured around here is, for example, this next slide in terms of what are some of the things we can potentially start to do about it. And that's pretty much the last part of today's conversation, but we'll circle back to this. And I thought this might be a good resting point and a good starting point for conversation. And I saw a few people nodding their heads when I talked about critical reasoning. So why don't we start there? What's the feeling and reaction to that? Do you agree, disagree, sitting on the fence?
How would you define critical reasoning? And is it something that can really be taught?
How would you define it?
I'd define it as approaching every situation with a critical mindset, to be thinking of reasons why something might not be true, counter to my basic intuitions.
Yeah. So trying to remove bias and assumption.
Long chain reasoning to sort of come to different output, extrapolate out to different conclusions.
Thanks for kicking us off. Any other takers?
Yeah, going back on a really good point.
Yeah.
Basically, the big problem is political, because basically people have their deep reasoning abilities, but generally speaking, there's a dogma, there's a process that they have to go through. They're hamstrung. In America and Silicon Valley, you don't have those problems, but here you have massive problems. No one can risk take risk.
So don't tell me you're suggesting that someone's telling you what the answer should be, and you should figure out how to derive that answer.
Absolutely, just about 90% of the time.
So, university graduates, they're all young, right? There's a whole thing about this that we're looking at is life experience, right? Life, along the way, you learn things that allow you to critically reason. You solve lots of problems in your life as you grow up. And yeah, that is where you get your critical reasoning from. So no wonder 20-year-olds don't have it.
Well, that's really interesting, because that's actually what I thought people meant when they were giving me this feedback, right? Surely they must be all talking about graduates, but actually they weren't. And that's what really shocked me. which is a big number of senior execs, and I'm not talking about the business side, I'm talking about, you know, the people that were the chief data scientists, the chief data officers, the heads of data and AI within organizations. I got two types of responses, and I'm sharing this with you out of interest. Tell me if it's of no interest and I'll move on. The really big firms with lots of budgets, financial services and some of the tech firms, by and large said, you know, we don't have a problem with getting good quality tech talent. They've got the big salaries they can offer, so that they get the graduates and people applying, right? But the problem we have is that some of this great tech talent is so technical, they get obsessed in the purity of the model. They lose track of the business context that started them on that project in the first place. And when they do finally arrive at the answer, which was already too late, they are unable to provide the explain how they arrived at the outcome. And so the business counterpart loses trust, doesn't apply and adopt the solution. And so we're back to square one. Now, obviously, that's a huge generalization of a problem that they're experiencing. But then when they started to talk about the critical reasoning component, they were talking more generally about their workforce at large. Now, of course, they've got stars and great people at all different stages. But to your point, I thought they were talking about just the graduates, but they were talking across the board.
So I started mentoring William and Mason. They're both finishing their master's degrees in data science, right? So as a mentor, my job's to find the big job. And
legend, we need more people like you.
Critical reasoning skills, evidence-based problem-solving skills is sadly lacking in enterprise, but not in these kids. The things that they're not learning at school is like stakeholder management. Like when you're 20-something and you've got a grumpy manager that's got a set of staff, they may not be listening that well. It's very hard as a young person to influence someone that's 40 or 50 and noisy. So I think there's a lot of those soft skills that they're not learning at school that would be helpful as well. So
big time. And that's exactly one of the areas that came out in the research. Yes, Arun.
So is it right to say that this is a data mislabeling problem?
Tell me more.
What I mean by that is what we think of critical reasoning first principles is more about like, you know, what you're saying is stakeholder management, which is more like, okay, manage stakeholders and align priorities in an organization, which is a different skill set than critical reasoning.
It absolutely is, but we're talking about two different things.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, which one, when you mentioned critical reasoning?
It's not stakeholder management. Okay,
right. So I just want to realize, so I think my view, like we in our company, we take interns every year from UNSW, UTS, Macquarie, like you saw the SPJ out here, take the interns, take them, you can make them do like first principles research. And I agree, I think a lot of them are quite smart kids. I think what I do see is, and I'm saying a database saying 25 to 30% of the university graduates, and I'm only focusing on graduates, not people who are in the workforce. What we've seen is, for one reason or the other, the curriculum, the way they're taught in the universities is very much like cut and paste, cut and paste, do your assignment, get your mark. And if you're above this mark threshold, then you're progressing. And I think that is something we had to force them to unlearn, saying cut and paste. Today I had one student who basically, they were doing a GitHub thing, saw an error clearly said, you should have your token, but they were more like, okay, cut and paste. I was like, okay, so you're not going through that process of diving deep, reading, understanding, writing notes. But I don't think it's prevalent. I think the kids are, I would say most of them are actually quite good. So that's why I'm just, the graduates are quite decent. They've done decent jobs.
Yep. Peter.
I was thinking about sort of numerical responses. We've all got amazing tools at our fingertips. And so being able to sort of sit down there and say, look, inflation's gone up by this much and prices have gone up by this much, kind of reason things through without a tool, and kind of say, like, these are the three factors that I think has changed. You know, that one's 1%, that one's 5%. And so any resulting changes over 10% is clearly rubbish. So some sort of like relatively simple putting some numbers together, not necessarily doing a calculation in your head, but actually that sort of very simple train of thought, so that when they see numbers, they can kind of go, actually, you know what, that's obviously wrong, or you know what, that looks really peculiar. So I suppose, so it's so easy to just chuck the numbers in a spreadsheet, get an answer out the back, and go with that.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out, right? You want to go first?
Yeah, that's all. So who is it that's saying that there's a shortage of critical thinking? Because I've been applying for a lot of jobs over the past few months, and critical thinking will occasionally get some lip service, but what they're looking for has used SAS or has used BI for 3+ years, has been programmed.
It's HR that's doing that. That's not the economic buyer that actually is employing them.
Yeah, you're in the wrong. And that's the problem, right? And actually, that brings up the next point I was going to raise. So we've got critical thinking. Let's package that for a moment. Then the other thing that came out really strongly is if you think about other industries, right, like lawyers, accountants, doctors, engineers, you've got CA, CPA, AMA for doctors, Engineers Australia, and a whole bunch of others as well. They create a trust mark in the industry that says, right, at the very least, someone who's a CA or a CPA or a doctor or whatever else has a minimum set of skills and competencies when they get produced and pump out. And then it's like, okay, we understand what that means. We understand the value of what that is. There's a certain trust associated with that. We don't have that in this sector. And when I spoke to a lot of practitioners and employers, it was a big problem. Because one, employers were saying that they're spending a huge amount of time, money, and resource in the recruitment phase, trying to weave through 400 applicants for one job to try and understand and figure out, well, which are the good applicants versus the ones that are fluffing their CV. And likewise, practitioners were struggling because there was no real way of indicating the kind of level or competence that I have and getting that differentiation between the next person that's just making that up on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And so one of the questions that I was really keen for us to debate and discuss is learning from one of these other industries that has some kind of trust mark a good thing or valuable for practitioners and employers to make this whole process easier? And if the answer is yes, how might we go about that? So maybe let's start with the first question. Would something like that make sense and be helpful? Let's debate and argue it. Who wants to go? Come on. Yes.
I want to sort of change the frame in terms of when we're talking about critical thinking. I would rather use the term holistic thinking, because when we say critical thinking, we are going into the realm of philosophy. And when I say I'm not a philosopher, but become into a broad language. Now there's one famous sort of philosophy that science without philosophy is blind. We have a tool, but we don't know why it was complex. When we are talking about people who have classified that critical thinking or reasoning is important, we have to question also the maturity of that context, because you know, in the West, after the industrialization, high specialization created people that do not understand their product at all. That's why the past went worse and worse. And look at the other big picture, because I've been taught from high school university, in principles, dialectical materialism is teaching you how to think from the perspective of consistency. And that's very essential because when we define IQ, most of the people think IQ is actually the person who finds the best answer. That's actually wrong context because the best answer for this time, in this context, is not necessarily the best for a person who thinks outside and who can think long term and see actually the answer working properly in different contexts. And that's what Nikola Tesla was one of the geniuses who understood how to take the best from the.
You got 10 seconds left.
I think I can talk like all day. But I think you get the idea that we have lots of misconceptions about this, and we need to understand the concept. So critical is about essence of the things, and we are many times missing the problem.
That's certainly what we're hearing. Thank you. So back to the point around the trust mark.
I'm not sure. My previous firm, I had about 1,000 people. So I had about 1,000 people working for me, large public listed consulting firm, and we hired across all of those different skill types. And it wasn't their SME skills that was lacking. It's all their horizontal skills. It's all these other things that none of these, CPA, any of them, they're not teaching these things that you actually need in the workforce.
Yep.
So I'd like to see some of that.
So we're talking about these things.
Yeah, those things, from my point of view.
Yep, that's helpful.
No, I kind of concur on that. And I'm coming to I would call it like trust mark or professional accreditation, right? That's basically another word for it. Professional accreditation for the job market is useful. Yes, it builds a trust. As long as a trust in those exams and how it's done is conducted, I think it smoothens. I mean, CA, CPA, you trust them to do their job, a basic skill set. But once again, I concur the same thing. It doesn't solve the problem that your doctor has gone through years of medical school as critical thinking, right? Skill sets. Many doctors don't. We find that, and that's why they get pulled up by the doctor's body.
So what if this trust mark had an element of the technical, but an element of the non-technical, like what we're talking about here, combining the critical thinking, holistic thinking, the business skills, the how to interact with other humans skills, and everything else that builds around that. Because you know what? Some of the employers I spoke to said, if you can find or produce people that have both the technical skills that I'm looking for and can successfully engage in the organization, then you've just discovered a unicorn for me.
Yeah, I think so. But you have to distinguish. You're going to have to fail people who don't measure up on.
100%.
Otherwise, your trust mark is
useless. 100%.
Yeah, I think that's key. And if you could do that, I think that would be fundamentally important and useful.
So if we did this, guys, right? If we continue this train of thought, if we did this, one hypothesis is you would have to bring together enough employers to say we all are happy with this level of, say, difficulty, robustness, whatever we want to define it as, that says if people come through this that reach this level of technical proficiency and this level of non-technical proficiency, we would want them and seek after them for our company. Would that be the way to create demand? Or is there another way to do it? Because there's 100,000 people out there, 50,000 of those people are really experienced in the second half of their career. A lot of them are going to go, well, I don't want to go and do a certification. I'm really good. I'm a 20-year veteran. That's below me, right? So how would we get those people to go, you know what? That is an aspirational thing that I want to get, because employees are going to give a shit.
Yeah, but the problem is that you come up to my bottleneck as well. The political level. The creative individual is not going to want to work in a very stagnant organisation, right? So they're going to go, ooh, I mean, my boss loves the fact that I talk to everybody. They love it. But when it comes to, but he's not really interested in really new ideas and stuff like that. So it's like, I mean, I'm stuck with this guy.
You just got to get him out of the way, mate. Sorry, there's another question.
Oh, not a question, but just maybe another point of view, because I felt, to me, and maybe to most of the people, we agree that critical thinking, critical reasoning is more, at least a big part is for us to challenge the existing situation, right? And so applying that thinking to the current problem setting, I was like, because we've always been talking about how to solve the situation or how to choose the best talent in the industry, but is this the right problem setting? That was my thinking. Because we have observed that, we got good grads, we got good initial employees, but after some time, after they've entered the workforce for some time, then their skills basically disappeared. And so if we do, for example, research in like a much flatter structure.
So your company's skills
right and
decreasing
into the uni, probably, yeah, like, so I think we will probably see very different results. Like currently in most of the corporates, right, people have their own roles.
Yep.
And so usually as like analytics or like engineers, they rely on, PMs, managers to solve those critical thinking problems. And that's why probably people aren't like really encouraged to do that kind of skills required kind of thing.
So what's the challenge back?
You mean challenge the employees or?
No. So I'm just trying to understand, are you agreeing, disagreeing, providing a different view?
I'm just saying, do we want to pursue like the current problem setting, pursuing with finding a solution to that? Because that might be a structural kind of problem instead of like a kind of like we can improve on the process and we see improvements on the results kind of problems. Just worth thinking, I think maybe. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. And it goes back to this gentleman's point around, we can't think about any of these as isolated problems, right? It's problems within a system. So needing to understand the context and the environment within which the problems exist. But it's very hard to boil the ocean. So you've got to start somewhere. And so this question's about, where do we start? Someone else? Oh, yes.
I think I've got that working.
Is
that on?
Oh, yep.
So I think one point I was just going to make is when we're talking about the critical thinking, we are probably actually talking about talking with stakeholders. So when we think about that stakeholder management and the critical thinking, there is a bit of overlap. And some of the challenges with critical thinking, when we look at data, we look at the result, we go, that's it, I've got it. And we don't actually go validate it with our stakeholders. I'm a massive introvert. Talking to a microphone right now is incredibly daunting. And I think that is the case for a lot of people who work with data. And my concern is if we start building a benchmark with critical thinking and stakeholder management, that you're actually then really only getting extroverts and people comfortable doing that. And how do you then ensure that introverts are still part of the workforce and we still have diversity?
Yes. So here's my challenge back to that. What do you think is happening right now in the absence of this training?
So they've got it on their CV and we find out in the workplace they probably don't.
Well, that's definitely happening. So I'll ask the question in a slightly different way. In the absence of supporting those like us that are actually introverts, who are the ones that you think are actually succeeding and progressing through the corporate ladder?
Unfortunately, probably extroverts typically. That's not to say there are always exceptions to the rule, and I'm fortunate enough that I've seen that in my organisation. Perhaps another way to look at it is it's critical reasoning is probably not necessarily, it can be quite job specific. So I've got a data scientist in my team and an actuarial analyst. When they join the team as part of their training, we went and listened to the phone calls. I work in life insurance. So we went and listened to phone calls of customers so that we actually connected the customers to our data. And I think there's probably an aspect of on the job learning that's going to be outside of any professional qualification.
Yes.
The other point that you also made around how do you maybe get older people to adopt. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't see it happening. If I think about financial advisors in the life insurance industry, there was massive regulatory changes probably about 4 years ago. COVID always messes up my years to me. And a lot of older financial advisors packed up shop and left.
Yep.
if we make it a requirement that it then detracts people away from the industry, you're actually going to lose a lot of talent.
Yeah. And that's the last thing anyone would want, right? And thank you for sharing that wonderful example as well, and having the bravery as an introvert to jump on the microphone. and I guess in some of the discussions I was having around this particular point, so far as, you know, when we're talking about these types of competencies, right? If you look at what's on this list, can you imagine people succeeding in being promoted and eventually progressing in their careers as the chief data scientist in company X or the head of data and AI without having sufficient proficiency in any of these competency areas, right? They wouldn't. So what's happening today then is an element of Darwinianism, which is survival of the fittest. Those few in this sector that are extroverts, that are able to, on their own, develop these skills over time, are largely the ones that are being successful and climbing the corporate ladder. That leaves a massive proportion of the workforce that probably could do as equally well that aren't getting there because they're just not getting the training that they need, because maybe they just can't develop it themselves. It's maybe not their personality. It's maybe just not in their nature, whatever it might be.
But once
right?
again, are we conflating stakeholder management, being extrovert with critical reasoning?
No, just I'm certainly not.
Separate. Okay.
I'm certainly not.
Because that's what you said is more being extrovert,
yeah,
being outgoing.
Yeah.
It's being extrovert doesn't mean you have critical reasoning.
No, not at all. Not at all. And so,
Alex, so let's say if we talk about business context and understanding that part. Even if you try and train somebody on that, the kind of learning you get from the training, the kind of learning you get once you're in that space altogether is very different.
100%.
Right. So I'm kind of seeing a vicious circle here. Opportunity leads to some learning, but if there is no opportunity, you're continuously trying to learn theoretically, but you're still not getting the opportunity, and you're not really able to come out of it.
Yeah, and we all know, don't we, that theory can only get you so far, right? So none of this can ever be successful from an academic point of view. It's got to be mixed with real world experience, right? And in many regards, I think part of what we're seeing today, guys, is the fact that maybe when we were all younger and entering the workforce, there was much greater degrees of on-the-job training, mentoring by more senior people, maybe more courses that were formally provided by employers. And oddly enough, a lot of that has just disappeared. And so we're seeing much more of these gaps in a non-technical sense because our people just aren't getting the training and the support that maybe we used to get when we were a lot younger.
Yeah, every big corp I've ever worked in, they said there's a budget for training, and then
yeah, that's.
I think training budgets have disappeared.
Yeah, training budgets. That's the official term for CEO's reserve. That was just my personal joke.
May I add?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think you probably raised one of the interesting questions about certification. I'm a CFA chart holder. Someone thinks it's probably one of the hardest financial designations, but anyway, so my comment about your thoughts, I think it's probably really could add value because it's not only like about some kind of how employer see you, but also it's about society, about people communicating with other people inside this. And for example, speaking from my experience, CFA adds a lot of resources, a lot of information. It's also a quarterly meeting, so you can meet other people from this CFA organization, speak with other members, share some thoughts about financial markets, how it's trending. So it's not only some kind of letter to present in your CV, it also a lot of resources, added value, community, society, and collaboration with other people. I think thinking from this perspective, I believe something similar in AI also would be very useful because there's a lot of knowledge and just IT industry in general, it's like open source minded. So people sharing knowledge more willingly in IT. That's why I think this is like one of the core base for IT professionals. and as a result, having some association, shared knowledge could be very, I think, useful and very productive.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. Imagine this on steroids and turbocharged, where you've got a incredible peer group, and back to your point around it has to be robust and it has to be disciplined. It has to also be aspirational, so it has to be tough. If it's easy and everyone can achieve a certain benchmark, it's meaningless. So
universities have.
Well, but let's leave that with the universities as their problem, right? But if we're going to create what Australia is going to need for our future, surely everyone in this room can recognise that data and AI is the most important horizontal in every economy between now and the foreseeable future. And right now in Australia, there's no professional body, there's no voice for this workforce, there's no sense of what standards are. Soon we're going to be having voluntary guardrails become mandatory guardrails, become legislation, become regulation, and it's going to become a dog's breakfast of how each different organisation is going to try and implement their interpretation and understanding of what all this means. And on top of that, the people that will be in those roles will have no training available for them in order to succeed, right? And so these are some of the things that we're thinking about and going, it doesn't sound like a good answer for how do we help Australia succeed in the next 50 years, given the significance of data and AI in our economy.
Yeah, given it just came back to AI again, what is your definition in this context? Because when I see data in front of AI, I immediately jump to what was data scientist last year. And most of what else has been in your presentation, I think, is in the context of analytics. And I think that's just a scope question, in that I think it's a perfectly valid thing to say we're thinking of data and AI people who work broadly in an analytics function. But then that, I think, leads on to two related problems. One of which is you need to be careful because most of AI is actually outside that. Pretty much all of the generative AI stuff is outside that. Most of the software engineering work. So if you take someone who was up on the screen earlier, Jeremy Howard, I don't think he'd fit anywhere within your structure.
And why do you say that? What gives you the impression we're only talking about analytics?
Because most of the rest of what seems to be in there, I mean, I've held analytics roles. It applies very well to an analytics style role, but less well to a software engineered role or a research type role, where there's completely different structure and objectives.
So when you say structure, can you help me understand? What do you mean in terms of the difference?
Well, so for example, software engineers.
Yep.
What's the accreditation body?
ACS.
Interesting.
That's how they see it.
Okay. I won't argue with that.
Australia. Fair enough.
No, you're right. You've got the same
whether they're
problem.
doing a good job or not, it is their role.
And there's IAPA. Anyone want to comment on analytics?
No, but I think if you look at the software industry, often the people who've done the best work are the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates who didn't finish university. Jeremy Howard is very into homeschooling, into supporting people who go out and play with stuff and come up that way. It's just a completely different.
So we're talking about the less than 1% of the outliers in that example. So just help me, please, because I really want to understand your point.
Yeah.
I think his point is that basically we really don't have a proper software engineering body, right? So that's again, and methodologies and standards we don't have.
Yeah.
Everyone's building their own, or we used to have all that with AS 3563, ISO 9001, you know, all that. We dropped it all.
We had SEI and it didn't work.
I'll just jump in. How many of, sorry. Every hiring manager in the software field tells the candidate to go and do a test using lead code. That's a given. What has happened is a proxy like lead code has filled that gap, right? So there's always a need. I'm actually I'm probably siding on the side of accreditation. I'm saying, yeah, accreditation is done. Sometimes it's done using a public body. Sometimes it's done using a private body. But HR, it's because 90% of the people any enterprise hires, they do want to make sure that the hiring process is faster. That's the reason why they look for accreditation, right? If as a hiring manager for me, I had to build a team of 60 people within 3 months in City. We were expanding, we're like, okay, 60. We didn't look like, it was not like ACS was not used. I love the organization, but no, it was like, all these private bodies which came in with this thing. You basically put 500 people through it, choose the top 60 who fit certain things, and then you go into the interview process. So I think that's, yeah, I mean, whether you use a formal industry body accreditation or something, but yeah, it's part of the process. It always has been, as far as I know.
Just want to think now again. So I know we touched upon this point of accreditation, right? Is accreditation really an accreditation? Is that really an accreditation, or is it slowly becoming a mandate just to make sure that you are being seen as somebody who will definitely? So, for example, like my wife is in accounting side of the world, and she's been in this space for quite some time, and she does pretty well. But just because she doesn't hold a CPA, she's not qualified to get a specific type of role in the industry. Now, that definitely doesn't say that she's not, skilled enough or she doesn't understand stuff enough, but she needs to have that stamp out there.
Can we grab someone else? Great debate going on up front. Someone who hasn't spoken yet.
So on that point, while we're finding the next question, on that point between, let's say, trust mark, and I use the word trust mark specifically as opposed to accreditation, is accreditation can be quite prescribed. And in this space in particular, so for example, when I was speaking to CDOs and heads of data and AI, etc., they said to me that actually some of the best data scientists they have don't come from a technical background, right? Psychologists and other humanities, etc., as well as those that were of a technical background. And so what they were saying, for example, is we don't want to have a prescriptive accreditation pathway like accountants, like doctors, like actuaries, for example, that say you have to do an actuarial science degree or you have to do a computer science degree, etc. But rather what we'd rather have is some kind of, say, certification benchmark that says, irrespective of what you've studied, if you can do these things, you're at the level required. And that way it's an inclusive process. It encourages diversity from any background, but at the same time can potentially act as that trust mark that people are looking for, both from a technical and a non-technical point of view, right? So hopefully that adds a little bit more color around when we're talking about that trust mark. That's what we're talking about as, it seems to be the insight that people are saying, look, we need something that tells us that's at the level we're looking for, but we don't want it to be a cookie cutter that everyone comes out of the sausage factory looking exactly the same, because then it's not solving the problem. Thank you.
I don't want to hijack the discussion too much, but I want
to. Don't.
All right, I will. I don't disagree with anything that's been said so far, but what I want to add is maybe the problem is the organisation and its lack of readiness for what AI is now, what it's going to be even in 6 months' time, which will be different.
So literacy and maturity, perhaps?
It's of non-AI people in the organisation that are managers or decision makers or strategic planners of some kind.
Yes.
They know they've got to spend the money because they've got a budget for it, and everybody has to have AI.
Yep.
But they don't have a clue often.
Let's AI it.
What they're doing. Well, that might be part of the solution.
Yeah. And thank you for adding that, because some of the people that are in charge of some of these teams, for example, in some really big institutions in this country, shared to me an insight very similar to that. They said, Alex, you know what? I've got a really good team, and they come from all kinds of backgrounds. So this is one of the guys that said, hey, I love my psychologists. I love my, people that did economics that are my data scientists, for example. And, the biggest problem I face isn't them. They said the biggest problem I face is the non-technical business leaders in our organization, because one, they don't understand any of this. And two, they still persist to pull together corporate strategy, completely ignore our data and AI teams, and then flick it over the fence and say, here you go, IT, go and implement. Now, we all can imagine the significant shortfalls of that kind of thinking, but that's still part of what's going on today. And so some of the problems to solve that we identified is not just data literacy, which gives us the language to have the conversation, but actually maturity.
Maturity and leadership.
Yeah, in terms of how do we actually know what good looks like in an organizational context.
So, out of interest, who have you been talking, how long have you been thinking about this? Are you thinking of setting up an institute that can do this sort of stuff? Where are you? How far along the track are you for doing something, like an accreditation, like a whatever, an institute or something?
Give the man a piece of pizza. So, in answer to that wonderful question, which I wish I'd paid for earlier, we've been at this for 6 months as part of this sprint. It's something that we started 2 years ago initially, when it was pre-Gen AI and it was all about, data science was the sexy thing and everything else. And now the scope has naturally had to include the AI and LLMs and everything else that comes with it in the context of how Gen AI has exploded and is blowing everyone's minds. So where we're at right now is we've arrived at and landed at these being some of the key problems to solve, and some of these being potentially some of the services that could solve some of those problems. There's two things that we want to now go ahead and do. One is explore, can we now create a new organisation to support the data and AI sector by bringing together a core group of founding partners for which we're looking to orchestrate, that will help seed and give birth to this new organisation, that will then bring together some of these propositions and actually start helping practitioners and helping organisations in lifting their own internal literacy and maturity, and also in helping people map their careers and develop their sense of career progression as well, especially in the areas of the non-technical that we talked about, and also particularly and timely in terms of the governance of data and AI as it's about to be regulated. So that's exactly where we're at right now. And we're hoping in the next 6 months that we can pull together a group of companies that actually can work with us to hopefully give birth to that organisation. So if you've got thoughts, ideas, you think your organisation should be a part of this, if you want to contribute, you've got my details.
Sorry, the DTA was Malcolm Turnbull's baby that was both the beginning and everything.
I know it intimately.
And I've applied for lots of jobs where they completely ignore me because basically my stuff's too radical. I do domain-driven design. So they just don't understand anything like that. So they write on their website, they say, you should be doing, agile development and stuff like that. But there's no standard, there's no reference, there's no samples or anything like that. But they must have budgets. They must be looking at people like you to join, to tell them or help them,
So we've spoken to the DTA. They've been very helpful in helping us understand that what the DTA does is set policy for the Australian Public Service, but doesn't implement. And so the key stakeholder in government seems to be the Australian Public Service Commission, and their job is actually help the competence development of employees in the Australian Public Service. So DTA sets the policy, for example, in terms of, say, how data, AI is to be governed, used, adopted, etc. And the APSC is the one that actually then sets the framework, the competence development. So they've adopted Sophia, for example, for their workforce and how that maps different roles, competencies, skills, etc. So we're definitely talking to them too.
This has been a joke. No one, every oil governor was
Well,
never heard of them.
can't comment on that.
Yeah.
Just to
You're not going to take me off track, are you?
Try to.
Go ahead.
I just want to point to some potential dangers. In this multipolar moving world, we have to understand it's not just a place for, I'll go directly to your Darwin fittest. It's not the fittest, but the most adaptable. All right, and this is the danger I want to point out, that the people that have power think that they are smarter only because they have more finances or they are in a position which is incompetence level usually. So we have to understand, let's look at a practical example. China has achieved much better AI level and they are ahead in many domains because, for start, they have a better critical thinking. And that comes from the lessons they've learned from the past. And this is the point where people intend to say, everything around me tells me it's not true. This is critical thinking about actually finding out what are all other indicators pointing out that critical thinking is about adaptability to understand all senses. And at some stage I tried, but it was too short. The original project management was on time, budget, and with quality, pick two. Quality was the least as understood, always down drain, and that's why there's so many problems. In data science, the three always important, and other than methods, tools, and business is always important, because without that thing, what Nikola Tesla said, this guy Edison, if he had a better education, would have saved so many hours by not looking for a needle in the haystack.
Do I need to give you another 10 seconds?
Yeah. Well, see, good things are, there was another author said, sorry, my friend, I don't have time to tell you short.
Love it.
Just one specific question on governance implementation support. So the government, or our government, has basically said that adopted ISO 42001. In the consultation paper, that's going to be the main goal. Is that something, that specific thing like ISO 42000, is that part of the conversation, or are you keeping that separate?
So that's separate. So really what that point refers to is the fact that a lot of organizations, and here I'm talking about boards and the C-suite, right? The government will release, and AICD, for example, releases their 12 principles for AI governance for directors, right? Then all the directors get this report and go, oh crap, if I don't do this, I might go to jail. So then they call up the CEO and say, hey, CEO, this is now your KPI. CEO goes, I don't know what to do with this. What do we do with this? CDO, it's your job, right? Then everyone then passes on to the next person. And what that's referring to is actually how on earth do we take a set of generic principles, understand how it relates to our organization, from critical thinking and first principles analysis, how do we then figure out what is our version of that framework and then actually implement it successfully? And at the end of that cycle, come back and actually audit ourselves and measure how well we're actually doing what we were hoping to do. So that's what that's specifically talking about. And just like competence development and career frameworks, everyone's doing their own version of this, and at the same time not knowing whether or not it's any good, right? So part of what we're thinking this body could do is actually, hey guys, how about a lot of us have got some smart people and they came together and said, this we reckon looks really good, and if you adopt this, we reckon that will keep you out of jail. And by the way, our members, they're pretty good. They can help you actually figure out how to apply this to your organization and implement it successfully. Make sense? Are we out of time, or have I just, bored everyone to death yet? Okay. Any other questions, guys? Are we all good? Yeah?
That's what I'm basically everyone's doing in every government department.
Basically build their own thing. You know, actually, there's in Canberra there's a new department which is outsourcing to government. So I mean, where they can provide reference architectures for stuff. I mean, that's what I was talking about with domain-driven design. The government should really be standardizing on, you know, where's the sample app, you know, we can all roll out the sausages, you know, but they're not, no one's doing that.
Imagine a government that has a homogeneous system that has single customer view and talks to one another.
Well, it's a consistent framework.
Is efficient and wow, you know.
Choosing basic.
I think there's a show that talks about that. I think it is called Utopia, right?
Have you seen the diagram of Microsoft? The comment about everybody like working against each other. So they use Microsoft in the government. So it's kind of
well, at least they could have a workflow for how do you choose your technology. They could at least do that. That'd be something.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll leave government out of it, but this is where, let's say I'll leave you with these comments. In a very short space of time, by adopting a similar approach and systems thinking, we were able to create FinTech Australia, stone and chalk, and mobilize FinTech in this country in a very short space of time. What it took, there was one key ingredient, that people like you gave enough of a shit to actually support the creation of something like this. This can't be one person, one organization making this happen. If people like us in this room don't pull in to do something like this, Australia's never going to have it. So the difference is me and you.
Well, it needs to be independent as well because the vendors just want to provide their own solution.
We'll just take their money.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, it needs to be independent.
Absolutely. We just take their money.
Are there any other competing bodies trying to do something similar? Yeah.
Don't know. All we know is the ones that are around aren't really doing the job. It's our opportunity, isn't it? Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for participating and being part of the brain effort. And hopefully, some of you will play an active role, and if not you, someone you know, that could really help accelerate things along. So thanks for coming and have a great night. Yeah.